Good afternoon. Being 1:30, we'll get this started. We'll start with roll call. John Marquardt.
Here.
Ryan Heine.
Here.
Chris Barkle.
Here.
Sherry Loest.
Here.
Lauren Nelson.
Here.
And Mike Welsh.
Here.
Is there any reason that anyone has a financial conflict of interest?
No. Loest.
No. Barkle.
No. Heine.
Markwart, no. Welsh, no.
Approval of approval of agenda.
I move to approve.
I'll second.
At this time, does anyone want to make a public comment?
My name is Diane Hogden. My husband Dave and I live in rural Mission Hill. And after watching last week's County Commission meeting and discussions surrounding solar farms, I contacted a couple of the county commissioners along with one member of the Planning and Zoning Commission to relay our own story of how solar farms are beginning to take shape in Yankton County. Approximately 1 year ago, we were informed by our neighbor that he was in negotiations with a solar energy company interested in obtaining leases from local farmers to establish a solar farm. We were told the company wanted landowners to enter into a 35-year contract. It was our understanding that the company was interested in a set number of acres to make the project feasible. At the time we learned of this, we felt as a small acreage landowner, we have 9 acres in rural Mission Hill, we really had no say in how the project would proceed. At this point, we've been told both by our neighbor and by other people and adjoining landowners were not interested, and so there wasn't enough interest by the landowners to proceed with the project. But that's only hearsay. We don't have any concrete evidence to back up that statement. When watching last week's County Commission meeting, my husband and I were disappointed that the issue of a moratorium was not given more serious consideration. This is what led me to contact members of the County Commission and the Planning Commission. It's very important that Yankton County officials take appropriate action to put into place ordinances that take into consideration the multitude of issues that will arise when a solar farm is established in this community. Solar farms are already being considered by landowners, and we would appreciate your support in seeing that Yankton County addresses the issue in a timely and proactive manner. Thank you for your time.
Can I just ask, is this going to be available to the public for discussion, or is this going to be between this board with no input from after the public comments from the audience?
I think today there's public here, and we're more than happy to listen to what you have to say.
But I mean, do I need to make my
I would say,
statement now
yeah.
and hold my peace?
Not
Or
necessarily.
I think it'd be good to make your statement now, and then I think we'll probably have another public comment at the end too. So, and possibly some more in the middle, I think, depending on where things go. It's a little bit open right now.
My name is Guy Larson. I'm a lifelong resident of Yankton County. Until recently was a rural county resident, have moved into Yankton proper. I am here as an advocate for the solar industry. Yankton County has roughly 340,000 acres. 250,000 are typically tillable cropland. Right now in South Dakota, there is one operational solar farm. There is another one that's permitted. In almost every county in the country, solar energy takes up less than 0.5% of the land in that county. I think we would be very fortunate in Yankton County if we could get a solar farm, typically between 800 and 1,200 acres. So we're looking at possibly 0.4% of the cropland of Yankton County. 66% of the corn crop that grows in Yankton County goes to ethanol. when you compare ethanol efficiency to solar efficiency, if you consider all the energy created in crop production versus the energy created by solar production, production in the Midwest is typically considered to be at least 17 times more efficient. If you consider gas mileage with ethanol versus miles per electric cars, you're looking at something in the neighborhood of 100 times as efficient in the production of energy. Most of the concerns that are brought up about solar farms tend to be not really applicable to what is actually going to happen. There's been talk of leaching and leaking, rare, cadmium, lead. Well, typically in the photovoltaic thin film collectors, the only issue is during the recycling after the lifespan of the collector. So we're looking 20 years down the road. One would hope that the recycling far outpaces that. There's concern that they reflect too much light. Well, thin film solar panels, which is typically what happens here as opposed to the reflector versions, which are more commonly in desert areas, they're meant to absorb sunlight, not to reflect sunlight. They have less reflectivity than the windows in your house. And the issue has been raised about roads. Well, sure, there are concerns about roads for everything, but that's something that can be addressed with a good zoning ordinance and a requirement for any developers to maintain the roads to, I've driven through, we toured one of the wind farms up in Bonham County, or I think it's Bonham County, and it was like driving on super highways compared to our gravel roads. They went in, they built new roads to do the installation, and I mean, it was some great roads. That's something that can be addressed. People wonder about agriculture and solar farms. Lots of agriculture is being developed to be done in the canopy of solar collectors. Sheep are one of the common things that you see with a grass mixture planted under the collectors and sheep grazing. In the news right now, they've been pushing hops that thrive under solar collectors. So there are a lot of different things that can be done. I think looking forward into the future, whether we like it or not, electric cars are coming and are going to be here to stay. And I think we need to be on the leading edge of this wave as opposed to trying to swim to catch up to it. I think we need to work in a timely fashion, get a good zoning ordinance. There are some great zoning ordinances, model ordinances from Great Plains Institute, counties in Iowa that have dealt with this. So it's not, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. And I think you would be well advised to look into some of them. So,
Thanks, Guy.
Hi, my name's Cindy Konopasek from Yankton County here out by the lake, and I am very happy to be here today to follow up on the zoning and planning meeting that discussed the solar farm. And I just want to make sure that the people watching this realize that there's a difference between personal solar energy that you have on your house that's attached to something, and what we're talking about here today, to my understanding, is solar farming, which is utility. So those are different regulations. Correct me if I'm wrong. I also wanted to ask that, so we have a zoning and planning board who was going through this information, and so it seems odd to me that here we are today at 1:30 in the afternoon, which is not a really convenient time for people to be here, right? Fortunately. I think that the zoning and planning board is all people that are elected to be on that board, and so this was the topic that was assigned to them. So here we are on a Wednesday afternoon at 1:30 when not everybody can be here. So I think that's just an important thing to share. So, thank you.
I want to make one clarification there. We're appointed, as the planning commissioners are appointed by the county commissioners, just so everybody in the public
Oh,
watching.
yes, yes,
So-
you are.
Yep,
That,
Yep.
many of you are appointed.
Yep.
But then there are some people up here that are not elected, right? So the county commission can appoint people that are not elected to be on a task force. So what I'm saying is the planning and zoning are elected by the county commission.
they're appointed by the county
They're
commission.
appointed,
yes.
okay, yes.
Yep.
So, but now we have more people being appointed to this board that are not on the county zoning and planning, which could be by itself the entity that the county commission has asked to work on this project, and now we have another task force that's separate from what their responsibilities are. That's what I was bringing up,
Yep.
but thank you for that clarification.
Yep.
So everybody's appointed up here.
Okay, so
Right.
we have 2 county commissioners who are elected, we have 3 planning commissioners who are appointed by the county commission.
Yes.
And we have 1 citizen.
Right, and that's typical right, so based on that, at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on a Wednesday, or Wednesday, and then we do have a county zoning and planning board who is appointed by the county commission to have been looking over this, and they were working on this project. So now we've added another layer. That's all I wanted to
Yep.
point.
No, and I'm not
Yes.
refuting anything
No.
you said, I just wanted to clarify.
No, I appreciate that.
of
And
so
that did
thank you.
require your input, and I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
you.
Am I able to make one statement more? Is that okay?
Yeah,
Sure.
come on up to the microphone, please.
I just wanted to clarify. Guy had mentioned about the 1,200 acres. This is a fact that came to us through another neighbor that said that they were looking for 1,200 acres in one location in order to put this solar farm in, because it needed to be consistent. So even though you say it may be a small number, they wanted it all in one area. The farmer that's across the road from us has about 600 acres, and they were trying to get other adjoining landowners so that they could reach this 1,200 acres. And then also right near our place are those large transmission lines that go through the county, and they were saying the reason that they wanted it in this location is because then they could tie into those large transmission lines in order to conduct the electricity. So, I mean, it might be a small percentage, but it was going to be in a concentrated area, 1,200 acres in one area.
Any other public comment? If not, we'll move on to the election of chair and vice chair. Do I have any nominations for chair?
I nominate, Gary. I nominate Ryan Heine for chair. This is Lauren Nelson.
I'll second. Sherry Loest.
Nominations to cease?
I'll make a nomination cease, or I'll make a motion to cease nominations and cast a unanimous ballot for Ryan.
Second, Loest.
All in favor?
Aye.
Ryan.
Okay, well, I guess I accept.
Go ahead and take over, Ryan.
All right, well then, we move to the next item is a vice chairman. So I open for nominations for a vice chairman.
Ryan, I nominate Chris Barkle for vice chair.
Have a nomination for Chris Sparkle.
Second, Loest.
Yeah, nomination and a second. Any other nominations?
Ryan, I nominate Mike Welsh.
Okay, a nomination for Mike Welsh in a second. I guess I'll second. Okay, so we'll just, I guess we'll do do we want to do a
I have a
written
sheet
ballot?
if you want to vote on it.
Yeah, let's do just a written ballot?
Yeah, Lauren's gonna have to just say.
That's fine.
Probably the person she nominated. I'll go on a limb there. Thank you.
Will be vice chair.
Okay, congratulations, Chris.
Thank you.
All right, we will move on to our next item, which is pretty broad and open. We'll discuss the goals, objectives, and timeline. So I guess really, let's just start off really with the goal. We obviously have the stated goal of creating this ordinance. Do you feel really this is a task? This task force really, I feel, is a subset of the planning and zoning committee. So anything we do here eventually goes back to them to do a final tweaking, and anything else to go to the commission then. So I think that's what our goal is to create at least all the recommendations of what should be put into this zoning ordinance in some of the details, I think.
Ryan? Oh,
What
sorry,
do you think?
Ryan?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I got a chance to talk with Travis Lassiter up here. He's the Pennington County Commissioner. And when they set up their committee to deal with their solar ordinance, that's exactly what they did. They set up a committee through their it was under their planning and zoning board. And they had, just citizens, they had, planning and zoning members, they had, county commissioners, so exactly what we have here today. And then when they got their work done, it was through the planning and zoning. So it's not so much this task force, goes directly to the county commission. It's involved with, it's through the planning and zoning. And that's how they set theirs up.
Yeah, and I think I agree with that. The proper flow for an ordinance is to go to the planning and zoning for finalization, and then to the county commission.
I think that's been our plan all along.
Yeah.
I mean, that's my thought, that the planning and zoning board members are going to be the final say to present an ordinance to the county commission. So therefore, what we're doing here today or for the next couple months or whatever long it takes us to put something together, a recommendation to the planning and zoning board, is just football some ideas around the table, and I think Gary agreed to be the secretary to take the notes, and that's my thought.
And this kind of goes into the timeline too. I think part of the reason we wanted to do a task force was the idea is that a task force could possibly meet more often, work a little bit faster, and in creating this ordinance, so that we're not sitting here waiting forever for an answer. Planning only meets once a month. Kind of already was discussed, is this an ideal time to meet for everyone? What do we want to set for a sort of a meeting schedule to try to accomplish our goal of creating a draft ordinance for the planning commission?
I think we do need to be very clear as how low we go per se. We've got the 10,000 foot view, 5,000 is the job of this task force to get down to the nitty gritty. Or is it going to be a bulletproof list? We want this, we want this, we want this, we want this. We're gonna allow it here, here, and here. You put it together, Planning Commission. So I think we need to be very clear at the beginning how low we are going to go in the details before it is given to the Planning Commission to finish, per se.
Well, I agree with you. How detailed do we get? Probably when I said draft, that might be too detailed for us.
Okay?
Ryan, I spent, since I found out about this, I've spent quite a bit of time on the phone with engineers from the South Dakota Public Utilities Commission, East River Electric, and I've attempted to contact some people at BY Electric because there are a number of issues about solar power that are fairly complicated, and that we would be much better off, in my opinion, if we're operating on a basis of facts, not opinions.
Mm-hmm.
I asked my contact at the South Dakota Public Utilities Commission if they would be willing to give this group what I call Solar Energy 101 presentation so that we know what we're talking about. I think it's critical to find out what the current state of technology is, what the state of technology may become, and how solar power actually works. Some rules of thumb that I've picked up already are that for every megawatt of production, it takes 10 acres of solar panels. So for example, the big project out in western South Dakota is a 100 megawatt project that takes up 1,000 acres. Then you come down to the local level, the individual solar panel level. My limited knowledge tells me that a solar panel produces DC electrical power, and that has to go through something called an inverter to change it into alternating current, and alternating current then has to be somehow given access to a transmission or distribution line. It's my understanding that local electrical cooperatives are very reluctant to allow access to these distribution and transmission lines for safety purposes, among other reasons, quality being another one. So if they're gonna send a lineman out to work on a line, they wanna make sure that they can isolate that line. And they have to know exactly who's producing energy and where it's being produced and where it's going to in order to do that. So that was my reason for wanting to talk to BY Electric, which I haven't been able to do yet. So all of this, the reason for my saying these things is that we need to know what the facts are regarding solar energy, and I think it would be very valuable to have somebody who actually understands the industry and how solar energy actually works to come in and explain that to all of us before we start making decisions on zoning ordinances and setbacks and so forth. I'd be willing to try to get somebody to do that if this group would be interested.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea, and I think that goes into our discussion here. I guess in my mind, the goal would be to kind of get the facts straight, get more public input, and see what kind of main things we want in an ordinance, and as far as actually getting into the detail of writing the ordinance, that's planning and zoning's job, but we wanna try and gather as much information and knowledge we can provide to planning and zoning in the county. And then also with doing, like, having a presentation from PUC or anything like that, that's going to stretch out our timeline unless we can move along, get them here, which I guess that's the job of this task force as well, because trying to schedule those kind of things into planning and zoning meeting is going to make this drag out for probably over a year, but
I think that's something we can definitely schedule in. I don't think we'll wait on it, but we can definitely schedule it in. It's something that we can do in this process, is to invite them in.
I think I can make it happen
Yeah,
quickly, and if it can't be done relatively quickly, then I think we'll have to bypass it.
mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure they will probably
I
be
think they'll
happy
probably wanna do that.
to do that.
And I think you're right, Ryan, that we need to, we should be able to have more meetings more expeditedly and give the planning and zoning an opportunity to funnel everything through their system in, I believe, in an expedited manner, rather than creating a moratorium and shutting this thing down for 6 months or a year.
So our, as Sherry had said, I think, when we talk about how detailed of a product we are going to create, the product that we're going to provide to the planning board is, I think, something of a level of a bulleted outline
Right.
of an ordinance.
Correct.
There's going to be quite a bit of fill-in yet for the planning board to do. And so when we think about this timeline of what we want to accomplish and when we want to accomplish it, the commission kind of was talking, okay, we want to have something end of the year or maybe by February or something of that nature. That means we really probably need to give 2 months to the planning board in that overall timeline to really be able to finish off this ordinance after we are done.
well, yeah, it's not only just the time that it would take to get all the detail in there, but then we're also required, once we have a finished product or almost completed product at planning and zoning, isn't it, we have to have one public meeting reading of it, and then a recommendation vote?
Right, so
Mhm.
once
And then-
we have the hearing, we have to have, notice it for a couple weeks and then have the hearing and then notice again for county commission. And then there's 2 readings and then it publishes and then you have to wait 20 days before it goes into effect. So it's 2 months plus process.
It's 2 months plus from the time that you think you have it completed,
Right.
Yeah.
so.
So really 2 months, 3 months, 4 months maybe, which kind of puts us into saying the life of this task force, we need to get our job done by October. Is that?
I made a quick outline. If the task force got their job done in August, the planning commission right now meets once per month. So that's September, October, November public hearing. And then you have 2 months for county commission public hearings by time they're 2 weeks apart. And then you've got 20 days effective, and that's February. And that's with this task force getting our plan together by the end of August. So I would say that's meeting at least once a week in August.
I think so, yeah. We would have to be every week.
Suits me.
I'm good with that.
Okay.
Mhm.
Maybe do 3 to 5 instead of 1:30 to 3.
I'm a preference to later in the day if that works for people.
I guess that works for me too, later in the day.
I'm
It's
good
better.
anytime.
I'm flexible.
Okay,
3 to
so
5.
3 to 5, and is there,
Wednesdays work good or what day?
Yeah,
Wednesdays are not good for me.
they're not.
what day would
What
work
day would-
better?
Thursday afternoon would be best.
Thursday? Okay,
That's fine.
all right.
Okay, Okay, so tentatively, our timeline is we are going to try to deliver a product by the end of August, and we're gonna meet 3 to 5 every week on Thursdays until we get that done. So, all right, so I feel like that's pretty aggressive.
It is. So if you could get someone here in that time frame.
Well, if they won't, then obviously they have missed the boat. And we'll get the information from somebody else.
If that's possible too, like, I think we should, I'm pretty sure we could probably do an online interface too
Yeah,
here with them,
what I
so.
envision is a Zoom
Yeah.
presentation, interactive between this group and whoever it is on the other end of the Zoom camera. And I envision them giving us approximately, let's say, a 30-minute or less one-on-one presentation with another 30 minutes available for questions and answers. And then their willingness to answer further questions if they arise. And that's the way I'll present it to them.
Okay.
And as I say, if those people aren't willing to respond, I'll find somebody else who is.
Currently, this system isn't set up for Zoom, so we'd have to have some kind of workaround for that.
Do we
We
have,
can-
do we have,
Can we do it at a different site or something?
What kind of,
do we have internet access, Gary?
We have internet.
I can set the Zoom up.
We can-
No, but put on to be on the projector.
I don't see why not.
All we
I see
need
what
is
you're saying. No,
all we
no,
need
you're
is
right.
computer and projector and,
Yeah, that's what they had said, the way they set up the live stream, but
oh, well,
Well,
what
I'll try to get
the
'em here in
live stream would
person.
be separate. The live stream would,
I
it wouldn't be
would try to
included in
do
the live
Zoom.
stream.
we have to do.
What's
I
that?
would try to get them here.
You would be
first.
doing
Yeah.
both, yes. The Zoom would just be their interaction into this meeting, and the live stream would still be the normal live stream.
That should work.
Yeah,
What if I try to get them here in person?
that would be really nice, but,
That'd be
yeah,
ideal, don't you
yeah.
think?
But, if that's too much of a pressure, because we are under a short schedule, I think we can also live with
This
this.
is Yankton County,
So-
they should do what we want them to do, right?
Yeah, after all.
Okay,
Could I make a comment?
sure.
I think it would be.
Can you come up to the mic, just because then everyone can hear?
I think you might want to consider also entertaining, hearing from some representative of the solar industry, because I'm sorry to say that I don't necessarily consider the PUC and the rural co-ops an unbiased party. Rural co-ops especially have historically been antagonistic to solar power development at the, especially at the individual level. So, I don't know, if I could find anybody to do that, I can try, but otherwise I think it would be good to talk to somebody and get their side of the story about the development.
Is your first name Guy? Is it-
Yes.
Oh. Do you know if someone put in, let's say, a 25 megawatt solar farm in Yankton County, if there's anybody that would buy that power from them?
I don't, but the company that spent the $25 million to build it, I think would know that. I mean, we're talking about the potential for hundreds of millions of dollars of taxable property in Yankton County. And these people do this for a living. I don't. They do. They know what they can sell. They know who they can sell it to. They know where they want to be. That's why you need to talk with them. But I'm just saying, let's have a balanced discussion about the whole thing.
So Guy, are you representing that it would be wise for people to produce a product in Yankton County that doesn't have a market?
I'm not sure that that is the case. I'm looking down the road where there is going to be a huge market for electricity, that we're not going to be able to provide with ethanol. A company that's willing to invest hundreds of millions of dollars to build the infrastructure to produce the energy knows what they're going to do with it. And they're not going to come here if there isn't a market. We're talking about an eventuality that may happen, it may not happen. But if you develop a zoning ordinance that says, we don't want you, you've got to be 2 miles from the nearest neighbor, you can't do this, you can't do that, well, then you've eliminated that prospect entirely.
Good. Thanks, Guy. I just want you to know, I'm not for or against any of this, but I'm a practical person. And it seems to me that if somebody was going to invest that kind of money in Yankton County, they'd want to make sure that somebody was available to buy it.
Yes, I'm pretty sure they have people on their staff that do that. I mean, they don't just say, hey, let's go to Yankton County and spend $400 million on a solar farm, and then maybe we'll see if we can sell it. I mean, this is a business.
I think,
Yeah.
I think Broyne Industries has built a solar farm in their Sioux Falls complex. Jeff Broyne might be a good individual to visit with from, like what you're saying, the guy.
I think certainly if we can fit, if you can find a contact who can fit into our aggressive schedule, we would certainly welcome a presentation as well.
I'll see if I can get a hold of Broyne Industries also.
Mhm.
Sure, that would be fine.
I can't remember what size their field is that they put in, but I'm thinking it was 25 or 30 megawatts that they put in to supply their whole complex in Sioux Falls.
Okay, so we have so our general goals. We have an aggressive timeline. I think, do we want to start to work on that, where that outline is? I think the plan.
Ryan?
Yes.
Ryan? Yeah, talking about, objectives and getting down to the nitty gritty, one thing that I would appreciate is, for the next meeting is looking at specific aspects of the ordinance, not trying to look at the whole thing at once, but breaking it down and saying, hey, next time we're gonna look at setbacks and, the cleanup or, whatever the terminology is called. Maybe the next meeting we'll talk about, buffer zones or noise or reflection or, you know what I mean? Just to break it down so that when we come to a meeting, we have specific topics that we've researched for the week and we know what we're gonna be talking about instead of going all over the place with the
Yes.
ordinance and spending, 10 minutes on one topic, but then spending 30 minutes, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and that's exactly kind of where I was going. I was like, let's talk about what our very large 10,000 foot points on this outline should be.
We got basically 4 meetings, right?
Basically 4 meetings,
So we got
yes.
4
Or more.
topics. And
4 or more
I think
topics.
I think there's basically maybe 4, maybe 5 main topics. You got the setbacks, you got the pollution, you got the
Decommissioning.
decommissioning is probably one of the top ones, but, so we can pick up 4 or 5 of the main issues and
Infrastructure.
schedule
would
them,
be another one.
infrastructure,
Yeah,
so.
damage to infrastructure during the process of construction. Yeah, so that's about 4.
And I think we need to step back a little further than that and talk about, and we did this at the Planning Commission, if anybody watched that meeting. We talked about the difference between roof-mounted solar and ground-mounted solar. And in that meeting, we felt roof-mounted solar could go anywhere in the county because you're not expanding a footprint per se. So the whole roof of Walmart, Menards, every farm building out there could put solar panels on their roofs without a need for a conditional use permit. It would just be permitted wherever that went. So that part of that discussion occurred. And then on the ground mount, we talked about a minimum size that would trigger a conditional use permit. And I think during that meeting, we talked about 50 kilowatts. So for an example, I have solar on our shop at home. We've got 36 panels, they're 250 a piece, so we've got about 9 kilowatts for our residents. And that would be on a roof. So after this ordinance was passed, et cetera, Sherry Lois could have went in there and put those panels on her roof. But I will say the next time we do it and expand, it's not going on a roof, because I'm in my 50s now, and pretty soon we're gonna have to get up there and start doing work on those. So the next time, we may put those on the ground. So in our little private residence, you know, the planning commission discussed, yeah, you should be able, since it's your personal use, to be able to put that on the ground without coming in for a conditional use permit. But at what point does that get so big, we're gonna supply our neighbors or this or that, that it warrants? And I think that discussion needs to happen before we start talking about setbacks, because first, we need to know where we're gonna allow this and what restrictions we're going to have. What do we consider a commercial or utility size? Are we going to have a maximum? Do we want to limit the size of these across the county? Do we want to limit the density? So if you've got, the kind lady talked about the aggregate, they wanted it all in one area, and the reason they wanted it is because it minimizes your transmission lines and your tie-ins, et cetera. Those advantages of scale become apparent. So if we write an ordinance that says you have to be, you know, different property, you have to be 600 foot off the property line, that delineates a change in ownership, then you're forcing these out. And is that something this county wants to do? So I think that discussion, before we start getting into the pollution of the panels once they're there and the decommissioning of them, I think that falls later in the process. You gotta set up your framework before you.
I think there's already some delimitations of that in our zoning ordinance that Gary has proposed.
Well, but I'm stepping back and saying, is that what the county commission wants?
Yeah.
Because that side of it, we've not heard of. So that, I think that discussion, everybody needs to be on the same page before we start walking down the little nitty-gritty path.
And that's something I was actually gonna bring up too, is like, so yeah, exactly what you're saying is like, we need to, I think one of the very first things we wanna really go over is definitions and categories within this ordinance. Because we really wanna know what we're talking about, exactly what it constitutes the solar farm, what's personal use, what is, because I kind of, when I've really started researching through all this, I really kind of started saying, okay, really we have 3 different levels of solar power generation that's happening out there. You have the very small residential solar. That really doesn't seem to be the big issue right now. And then you have the mid-level, which is kind of similar to what you were talking about up in Sioux Falls. You have possibly a business or something that is creating solar, is generating solar that's going to be solely used on that property, and it could be a much larger system. It could be in the megawatt range. And then you got the last one, which is really a public utility size operation, the 1,000 acre solar farm that's intending to solely generate energy to be put onto the grid. And so we got those 3 things. And when you look at this, we have, our ordinances does cover already some of the stuff for residential solar. And then the PUC steps in. I think the mark where the PUC steps in is at 100 megawatts. 100 kilowatts or 100 megawatts?
Kilowatts.
100 kilowatts, okay.
The
I thought it was 100
PUC
yeah, I thought it was 100 megawatts. It's 100 megawatts is what I read on their site, I thought. But, okay. But what I was seeing is that there's possibly a gap there between that residential to that PUC takeover, and I think that's kind of where we really want to make some clarifications too. So I feel like one of our very first things is definitions, defining out what we are really looking at. We can start talking about some of these limits that we think are there, and at least knowing some of the key definitions. Might not be all inclusive. That's up to the planning board to finish, but we're going to try to get those things set out first. I feel like the next thing then right away then is into location restrictions and stuff like that. We start talking about the setbacks of things and stuff like that. So, and locations. Do we want these in ag zones? Do we want them to rezone to maybe a commercial zone because it is more of an industrial operation and things like that? Okay, yeah. And I think once we have those location things, then we can do another meeting then talking a lot more about infrastructure around that, and maybe that flows back and forth with location restrictions. And then the final meeting maybe be talking about the environmental decommissioning plans, which could, hopefully by that time, we really have the knowledge of the risks involved in large installations and stuff like that. And we have the facts in front of us, not just the what can be sometimes
It's on the internet.
opinionated.
It's on the internet.
Yeah.
It's gotta be true, right?
Exactly. So, I think that might be the way we flow through this, for the next 4 weeks,
Okay.
if everyone agrees with that.
Yeah, it sounds good to me. I think that makes
So
sense.
Ryan, you put an agenda out lay that all out for us on a timeline?
I guess I can work out that agenda.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay, that actually completes the item 6 there. Do we want to key into the first item of it or not, or do we want to have everyone think about this and get ready for the next meeting?
Ryan, I think it would be good just to, I mean, to be more productive. I mean, I think we could, I don't know how much everybody else has researched, but, you know, if someone on this committee hasn't, you know, you just kind of sit and hash things. It's not until you really research it and come back to the table and have some solid ideas. So, I mean, if everybody researched this or has an idea, I think it would be, we could go ahead. But, you know, if we have a couple that are, you know, not sure or not, you know, haven't really researched the topics of, you know, size and definition and things,
So
you know, it'd probably be better to research and then come back next week.
you actually give a really good point. We actually have 3 planning members here that have already started this. And so it would be really good to know what they've already come up with, if they can kind of overview what we are starting, possibly what they've already started with, so that we can jumpstart.
Sure, yeah, we can go kind of through the draft that we kind of worked on. Gary put most of it together for us, and
Is it the red items in the?
yeah, it'd be the red line version. Let's see, so if you start on the definitions, Gary, is there any way we can get it up on the projector, or?
I'll have to go get it. Yes.
So we did start, I guess this is kind of a combination of several ordinances that were gone through, and Gary did most of the research, and then we worked on it, made a few changes last planning and zoning meeting. I don't know, I'd say it maybe looks more complete than it is, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I think there's a few extra in there too. I think we can whittle it down even further. And so let's talk about building mounted, just to begin with, because we talked extensively to make sure in our ordinance that when I go in as a new person moving to this community, I know exactly what I can do. So can I put it on my roof? So we talked about building mounted, not having any restrictions. So I'm just gonna throw that out there. Is that where everybody on this task force believes? Should we have restrictions on building mounted?
I guess personal buildings I would not have an issue with, but possibly commercial. You take a building the size of Walmart and fill that up with solar panels, and you're gonna be talking the same kind of, not near the big area as a solar farm, but you could have 25, 30 megawatts that solar panels are gonna produce up there on top of that building.
And so I'm just gonna play devil's advocate. What's the downside?
What's the downside of a 800 acre solar farm?
Well, but that's acre, that's not building mounted. We're talking about building mounted.
I understand, but you're gonna use the same panels pretty much.
So
as-
I think
as-
there's and this is what I was thinking too, is like, is there a difference if we have a use difference? Is it different if the sole purpose of those panels is to sell energy onto the grid versus the sole purpose is to supply a building with power?
Okay, so then, let's stop there. I sell energy to the grid.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to be careful when you define it.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you say, if you're selling to the grid, then I have to have a CUP. So you have to be putting either megawatt limits on them or a surface area limit or something. And that's why the definitions are the key here.
Yeah.
Once you get the definitions, everything else falls out from there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think I agree with the building mounted differentiation in there because it is a little bit different than like a utility size facility. First of all, most buildings, even something like the size of Walmart or these factories, aren't 800 acres.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not going to have a ton of, I mean, you might have a lot of panels up there, but it's not going to be near the size of a utility facility. And then also, just if you're putting it on an existing building, at least, if the roof's not designed to carry that much weight, it's going to limit the size of it. You're looking at a drastically smaller facility for solar than if you go out and do 1,200 acres or something out in the middle of the county somewhere. So I guess for me, the building mounted, just in itself being on a building, limits the size so much that I don't think it's worth as much regulation.
Or does it even merit any type of extra regulation or differentiation at all? Because setbacks, buildings are already abiding by setbacks. Whatever a building occupies already sits within setbacks, and all these other things is already a visual obstruction for whatever is there already. So it's not like there's any new visual obstruction or any other, what new problem is created by a solar panel on a building. It's really hard to find one.
Right, so that's why we
So
kind of
then are we gonna regulate the kind of panel that goes on top of a building? It's taller, there's reflective panels and there's non-reflective panels.
That was gonna be my next suggestion to incorporate.
So I truly think that if you are gonna put it on a commercial vehicle or building or complex, there should be a CUP involved.
So is a farm building a commercial application?
I don't think so.
So you can see where I'm getting to those details. And the other thing is, if I live out by the lake and I live lower on the hill than Bob, and I put panels on my roof, and Bob looks down and gets a suntan off the panel reflection, we will get complaints on that. And so, how far does that mean everything that goes on a roof has to be the non-reflective?
We could pick this apart till the cows come home, and I understand what you're saying, but if you're gonna use the energy off of those panels for commercial use, whether it be your own, I think there should be a CUP involved.
So if I don't use a lick of mine, and there
You're
are some
not-
days
you're
like
not
today,
using
we're
it for-
selling to the grid pretty hard.
Well, everybody that has solar panels, whatever they don't use goes back to the grid, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
That's not commercial. What I'm saying is a Walmart or a TMA or someone like that they're gonna put solar panels on their building for their own commercial use, they should have a CUP.
Is this where you
I
want to
disagree.
start?
I guess we're up in the definitions yet.
Yeah, we're kind of more
Where
into
you at?
yeah.
Yeah, go back to the general definitions of what solar,
So as you can see,
Solar
this is kind
is.
of why I
Yes.
made the comment. I think it looks more complete than it really is because we kind of put this in here to think about and talk about, but it's,
Yeah, these were
it's
just
not
a starting
finalized
jump
by
off
any means.
point.
Well,
Yep.
this would be
And
a,
we'll have to change that typo of kilowatts to megawatts on some of those.
okay.
Yeah, so like what we were just talking about right now is the solar energy system building mounted. So we added this in the definitions because we thought of making a differentiation between if you got something on a building, existing building, and something that's on the ground, new
I think
construction.
to step over these questions that we're having, probably the best way would be to go with the production of output, the volume of output, rather than what type of building it's on, whether it's on a roof or on the ground. If you stick with volume of output as the differentiating factor, you won't get into all these what-ifs and variabilities that you run into, that this conversation is envisioning.
And we talked about that at the planning commission, and 50
50 kilowatts.
kilowatts
Is where we kinda-
was where, for ground mounted, 50 kilowatts was the tipping point. Anything under 50 kilowatts, the planning commission discussed, you don't need a CUP. Anything over 50 kilowatts would. You could apply that to roof sizes as well.
Right, and if you think about it, I can't do the math fast enough in my head, but if 1 megawatt is 10 acres, 1 acre is 43,560 square feet. So, 50 kilowatts, Ryan, you're a mathematician, I'm not sure how big a space that would require to produce, how big
You're
a
talking
solar
about-
field would have to be to
well,
produce 50 kilowatts?
And that figure of the 10 megawatts,
That's
per-
1,000 acres.
yeah, 10 megawatts for, is it 10 megawatts, 10 acres or?
No, it's
or-
1 megawatt
One
for every
megawatt
10
per-
acres.
per 10 acres. So that's with those ground systems where they actually have to, you can't completely fill that area because you have to have maintenance paths and everything
Exactly.
else. So there's, it can't be 100% density. And so, when you're looking at these, if you were to really pack them in, you could pack in 100 kilowatts in about 10,000 square feet.
Okay.
But,
So
that's
that's a
really
quar-
packing
that's
them
a
in,
quarter
a
of an
quarter
acre,
acre.
just for reference.
But you wouldn't likely do that simply because it would be very hard to maintain.
Right. So I think that we could, if we had some time, calculate out what 10, what did you say, 10 kilowatts? Or
50 kilowatts
How
is where
big a-
we
How
set
big an
the-
area that would be, and with routine maintenance corridors and so forth,
So you would probably double that. So
Yeah.
reasonably 50 kilowatts would be a 10,000 square foot area. And so
Yeah.
you think about
That's what I had
a
too.
very large.
So 100 by 100 building,
Mhm.
okay, so that's not gigantic.
Mhm.
which is not Walmart's much
Not
larger
Walmart,
than
yeah.
that.
Right.
But
So if we, again, if we use energy output as our criteria, it allows us to step over all sorts of possibilities and what-ifs and on a roof or not on a roof. If we use that criteria for our, what needs a CUP and what
Mhm.
doesn't need a CUP, I think that'll simplify the process a lot.
So essentially, any system over 50 kilowatts needs a CUP, anything under would not.
I
And that
think-
makes it clean.
I
mhm.
think that's probably a fair way to go.
I think so too, and that's one of the things I think a goal for our ordinances, and we don't want to end up making an ordinance that comes overly restrictive, that we have every person with that wants to put a solar panel on their house suddenly having to come in for a
Right.
CUP.
And just as a general principle on this, I think that if we get down in the weeds too deep,
Mhm.
we risk the possibility of eliminating opportunities that might be very good and allowing challenges that might be very bad. So in other words, let's stay up at a relatively high level of abstraction, because what we're gonna be producing is a bullet point paper.
Mhm.
And let the Planning and Zoning Commission, if they feel the need to get down into a deeper level. I think we should probably stay up at a relatively high level for just that purpose.
Yeah, but we still need to have these definitions, at least a few of these definitions put together for our bullet points, I feel, so
Right.
that we have that framework. And,
Ryan, can I jump in here a second?
sure.
Okay, so down in Kansas, researching some solar farms and ordinances down there because Kansas, as you know, is exploding with solar farms. What one county has done is they have put in size or output. So for example, one county says a medium size or solar farm, it's 3,000 feet square, but less than 4 acres, or it's 20 kilowatts to 99 kilowatts. So if they propose, so say there's a company that proposes, it's gonna be, 4 acres, but, which would be technically medium, but it's gonna produce more than 99 kilowatts, then it becomes a large. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So they have two, so they go by acres or square footage, feet, and they go by the output, so that they don't have somebody, because, like one of the directors down there said, he said, solar panels are so different. He says, you can have, one solar panel, they can come in and they make really large, they pump, they install really large solar panels, so it doesn't take as much space, but it produces, a lot of megawatts, and the vice versa. They come in with small panels and they don't produce, it takes up more space, but they don't produce as much, they don't output as much. And so that's why they did that, is to make sure that they don't have somebody coming in and, messing around with, being a large, but they fit into the medium because it's size-wise or wattage size. You see what I'm getting at?
Yeah, I do. Because yes, there is a lot of variations in solar panels. There's monocrystalline, polycrystalline, and there's some that operate on various different output voltage, DC output voltages, and that all translates into how a whole system is designed. And then not only that, solar panels, as are today's most current technologies, are still not very efficient. There could be a lot better efficient solar panels in the future where you could be producing a lot more energy on a smaller area. So that's something we have to think about too. Do we do this size and output?
What we could do is some language that says more than 50 kilowatts, but no more than X number of acres, whichever is less. In other words, as you point out, as technology improves, you can produce a lot more energy in a smaller space. And so if we go only with surface area, I think we're painting ourselves into a corner. I still kind of like the idea of just going with output. What do you guys think? I don't know.
I think we have a question, and I'll let you comment here. You seem to want something to say. State your name first, and
I was here the other night and blew off at everybody. But I'm George Schermerhorn. I live up on 2909 Julie Street. I've been here since 2015, basically. My son is a big home builder in Dallas, in Texas. And 8 years ago, they went solar. And the competition is gone by the wayside. I mean, I don't even need to go there. He's rolling. And one of the things that the companies, he runs 3 of them, they relayed anything to the basic rules that they started with is based on time. Okay? So in 2 years, we're going to review this again. In 4 years, we're going to review it again, because the technology is going to change It's gonna get better, and you don't wanna fall behind. So you always wanna have a loophole in time where you can change what you've already started with, according to research, according to how things materialize. The newest thing is everything moves with the sun now. There's very few new ones that are just put on a roof and grab energy. They've got braces and whatever so that they get the full range of the sun from sunrise to sunset. Started out not costing as much, of course, when you gotta put the braces on and you gotta put the motor on and you gotta move the panels and all. The solar systems do this research. It'll come at you probably every 6 months. I mean, you'll get information about things coming your way. And if you have a time frame to revamp what you've already basically started, that leaves you a way out to readjust. And then somebody who had panels 25 years ago is pissed off because they're behind times. They can't. There's no, we changed it. You were there, you did what you did to do. Now you got to change again to whatever timeline we're in. If you want to improve or get more or get less or whatever you want to do with the electricity that you're producing. Just a thought. Tie it to some timeline. Every 3 years, 4 years. You don't want to go 2 months. You'll be in meetings all day.
Yeah.
You know, just an idea.
Yeah. So again, output steps over all of these.
It does because when you get down to it, and you have
So what
an
happens?
on-site uses, it's not so much a form of how much energy you're producing, but how much energy you're actually going to use on that site. And if it's a system that's for on-site use, you know, that's not going to change as much as technology.
Technology's not gonna get worse.
Mhm.
We can be certain of that.
But what happens when 2 years from now, the panel that you put on top of your house puts out more than 50 kilowatts?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer.
That paragraph up there says residential building. Walmart is not a residential building.
Mhm.
Now, maybe you gotta have two different categories for solar energy system, building mounted, BMSES residential and BMSES commercial.
Well, and that's where I was thinking that maybe the categories could be, again, the building mounted, we don't think about, but saying whether you are, whether you are a residential and you're using it for local use, or you're a commercial operation and you're using it for local use versus, and then lastly is the utility level where you are directly just selling it to the grid. And that's your sole purpose.
Those would be the three categories.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, rather than having a ground mount or a building mount, like you say, you're gonna use it for residential, for personal use, you're gonna use it for your own commercial use, or you're gonna sell it.
Mm-hmm. And then when you look forward to your restrictions and your locations, you know, you're really looking at the ground mounted, because your building mounted are already comply with any setbacks.
Mhm.
And so you're just going to not worry about ground mounted, building mounted, you're just going to be worried about solar panel setbacks altogether done. And you would have you could have classes then for residential and commercial, and then you would have a utility scale.
Sure.
All of them with a limit of 50 kilowatts.
I think so. And then whatever else would be above that.
Goes with a CUP.
Yeah,
So they are allowed. So
Right.
if some utility wanted to put in 49 kilowatts, they could do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
But if they wanted to do 50, then they have a CUP.
Yeah.
because it's not gonna get, the solar field to produce 50 kilowatts is not gonna get bigger. It's gonna get smaller. And so we don't have to worry about somebody expanding the size of it, if you get my drift. That's not a problem.
So I think when we go back to these red line definitions first here, the building mounted versus ground mounted is not a big distinction we need to make.
Correct.
I don't think so.
Yep.
Correct, so if you have those three, then when you fit those into the ordinance, you're going to have to list something in the permitted uses. You cannot use the word utility. Right now, we have the word utility, and we may have to amend our utility definition. So solar's not part of utility in there, because right now, utilities are permitted uses every inch of this county. So when we go and put residential, commercial, and utility less than 50 kilowatts in there, do you simply call it a solar energy system less than 50 kilowatts is a permitted use in every zone? And then you have to, anything over that will be a CUP, and which zone is that allowed in? Do you see where I'm going with that?
Right.
So once we get the definitions, then we put them in the zones in our county.
Yep, and I guess, touching on that too is also why the planning commission was talking about a possible moratorium on the solar farms until the county had an ordinance, because the way that our ordinance is written right now, a solar farm currently would be considered a utility. It would be permitted. All they'd have to do is buy the required number of acres in any given district. If it's ag, 20 acres. If it's commercial, 2 acres.
Or leases.
Or lease, and pretty much walk into the zoning office tomorrow with a plan and say, here, we're gonna put up a solar farm, and it's less than 100 megawatts, so we don't have to go to planning, or we don't have to go to Public Utility Commission, give us a permit. We don't have to tell anybody. We don't have to give out notice. We can just get a permit and start building. And that happens all the way up until the point that we actually implement this ordinance that we're working on. So that's the reason that the planning commission was talking about doing a moratorium, and that's why it made it into the county commission's meeting, because this could be a potential problem. Anybody could walk in basically right now with no rules. It's kind of the Wild West of whatever you want to do.
Yeah, we're exposed a bit,
Yeah.
in a sense. And so if we were to recommend to the commission, at least early on, about doing maybe not so much a moratorium, but we could also do a temporary zoning that maybe could at least band-aid this till we get this ordinance fully in place.
And if I read the law correctly on that one, that is purely a county commission action. That does not have to go to planning. Temporary zoning.
The South Dakota Public Utilities Commission uses the word facility.
I was thinking of the same word, because I was, when you think about, let's say it is a coal plant, it's a facility, it's a,
Right.
it's a power generation
That's what I'm
facility.
thinking too. What designates a solar farm as a utility?
And so a solar farm is not a utility. A solar farm is a power generation facility.
That's exactly right.
That
It is not
that
a
uses
utility.
solar as its source of energy.
Right.
And if you use the word facility, then we're able to bypass Sherry's legitimate concern about using the word utility and then having to redefine what a utility is.
And so
And we could coordinate our definition with the South Dakota Public Utilities definitions, which I can't get up on my phone right now because I don't have enough speed. But I think the word facility, as it is used by the South Dakota Public Utilities Commission, might be a good template for how to describe what we're talking about.
And so we have a solar energy facility. And I like that because not all solar energy facilities use semiconductor solar panels. We also have the mirror collection types that melt salts and create heat stores and steam turbines.
Right.
So, so maybe this solar energy system utility scale is more of a solar energy facility. You know, we look at the definition, any non-building mounted SES, we could also now get rid of non-building mounted. Any solar energy system with primary purpose of delivering solar energy for heating, cooling, electricity, generating or water heating and distributing energy to the end user by electrical utilities or power system operators.
You're reading the one that currently
Is
is
solar
utility?
energy system utility scale.
Okay. So we've talked about trying to get rid of the referring to building or ground mount. So any SES with the primary purpose of delivering solar energy for heating, cooling, electricity generating or water heating, distributing energy to the end user by electric utilities or power system operators.
I feel like to the end user is kind of,
You know, since we're setting the same limit for all of them, 50 kilowatts, do we need to have residential, commercial, do we need them separated? Do we just need to say, we have a solar energy system, and it's something that uses solar panels or whatever to produce electricity? And that's our definition, that's the only definition we have. And then, within our ordinance, we have anything under 50 kilowatts is listed in the permitted areas. Solar energy system less than 50 kilowatts permitted use. And then in the CUP, we have solar energy system greater than 50 kilowatts. And that's it.
I like
yeah.
that.
And then the next step, if everybody thinks clean, one definition, and you put it in each of our zones, what you can do and what you need a CUP for, the key there is to figure out where do you need a CUP?
Yeah,
And
that's
where's it going to be allowed greater than 50? And
Right,
right
that-
now, ag was what we had talked about, because commercial lots right now are, is it 1 acre, half acre?
1 acre, I thought, or
Might be a half.
might
We
be a half,
lowered that.
yeah.
I think we did. So, you know, and then the point was brought up, these are commercial applications. Do we require them to rezone to commercial? Do you see what I'm getting at? Do we allow them in
think- I
commercial?
think most of the other ordinances actually allow only ag for solar farms.
Right. Yep, exactly.
Well,
And if we're okay with saying, you know, it's in an ag zone, it's not an ag use, if we're okay with saying, well, it's in an ag zone, that's where we allowed it, and just walk away, I'm good with that too. But it was, I just brought it up
There was
because
a
it
couple I
was
saw that had them
mentioned.
listed under as an industrial use
Yeah,
as
there
well.
was one that I see.
So, yeah, that's not, the one thing that I think about is once you put the solar farm in, it is very much, you know, or a large solar farm. You have 600 acres, 1,000 acres. I mean, you're talking 2 sections of land, almost contiguous, is what they want to do, what they'd like to do. That is going to be in place for 20 to 30 years. I feel like that is not an ag application. An ag is for agricultural applications. So I don't think it's a big leap to say that maybe this is a commercial application now. This is a commercial zoned area. Because again, that's just making the distinction that, you know, whereas some people do like to live next to ag, commercial could be a different thing. And it's not like a barrier to entry for them. They would have to get these properties aligned and built into the right zone and everything. So it is a little bit of paperwork on our end of stuff, but then at least our zoning maps really kind of reflect how things are being used.
That'd also give you an idea of what's there, because if you take even a 500 acre parcel and you put a solar farm on it, if you would rezone that and put it on our zoning map, that 500 acre parcel of commercial, if you made it commercial, would be larger than a lot of the commercial areas in the county currently.
Yes.
I mean, it would make its own plot on the zoning map. You would definitely notice it. It's not like you were just putting a dot of a small factory or something out here, whatever. You're changing a large parcel of acreage
Yeah.
to a totally different use.
And then there's some of the advantages of that is that under commercial, I think our setbacks are different for certain things, and so those setbacks now are reduced. They're no longer ag setbacks, which are much greater. So then we don't have to make exceptions for this operation. It can operate within a commercial kind of setback rather than an ag setback.
I guess in the zoning ordinance or the draft that we've come up with, pretty much it was saying that none of the rules of ag zone district apply here. We're making a whole new set for this. If you get down further into the document, and it specifically references like setbacks, says none of the ag zone setbacks apply. We're going to use these ones. So whether that was the same in commercial or not, whether you require different setbacks there as well, that would be something to discuss. But I'm just talking about the actual use of it. You're changing in such a large area, the use of such a large area, that it makes sense to make it fit what it actually is. It's commercial, make it rezone commercial. If I was going to go out and buy 500 or even 100 acres of ground out in ag zone district, and I wanted to make a housing development out there, I'd have to rezone it.
Yeah.
So
and
it only makes sense that
I think, you'd also talk about possibly, there could be, as a large solar farm, you put this in, they might actually end up with a little bit of sort of protections under that, because now they are a commercial operation. People who are residences buying a property right next to it, they will know ahead of time they're buying property next to a commercial zone, and it's a solar farm. It's not like
I don't have a
Special
strong
sense.
feeling about this, and I'm not an expert on the difference between commercial and agricultural zoning, but keep in mind that a lot of the practices on solar farms now include agricultural use. Grazing being a big part of it, especially for sheep and goats. Also raising of grasses and alfalfa, for example, because I'm not sure of the technology, but I think many solar panels allow a good bit of light to come through so that things will actually grow under the solar panels, and that best practices seem that you would combine solar panels with grazing so that you don't end up with a weed problem and interference of, let's say, trees. Sheep, for example, would much rather eat a weed than a blade of grass.
Yeah. But the property still, the primary use of the property is a solar farm.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
You
And so
might,
that's
you might
why
have
I don't have a strong
those-
feeling on it, but keep in mind that.
you might have those small symbiotic things that you can do that you get a mutual benefit, but the primary property use would be a solar farm.
Right.
They're gonna put that over over any type of agricultural product they have.
I guess I kind of like that because there would be a step involved in getting the zoning changed from agricultural to commercial. So that allows the Planning Commission to get involved and for the Yankton County Commission to get involved in order to make that change. And then And then also, as Chris points out, you could look at a map and tell exactly where they are. And so all of that would be helpful. I guess a question in my mind is whether or not commercial zoning would allow this type of grazing and so forth. I don't know what commercial zoning allows and doesn't allow.
Well, and that would be like, again, we would be bringing that up into that week 2 of location and restrictions.
So I'm gonna jump in here and I'm gonna be devil's advocate.
Sure.
Good.
So we have someone coming in and they have asked to rezone a section, 640 acres, for commercial because they want to get a CUP, so they have to rezone it first. Okay, so we went through that, we rezoned an entire section commercial. And at that point, they say to themselves, you know, solar isn't us. But this is what I can do now.
Oh, yeah.
I can put arcades and bars and daycare and financial institutions and hotels, manufacturing, self-storage warehouses, theaters, vet clinics, things like that. But the thing I can't do in commercial is ag.
Yeah.
And ag is defined in our ordinance. Planting, cultivating, harvesting plants, et cetera, vineyards, grain elevators, et cetera. So that's being devil's advocate.
Very good
That's
point.
why I'm saying that
Very
most
good
of
point.
the other ordinances that I have read, and I've read several of them in the last week,
So if it falls
specify
through,
agriculture.
or if at the end of it, they say, you know, we need new panels, we're not gonna redo it, we're gonna decommission it, we're gonna turn it all back to ag land,
Yeah,
and it's already ag.
that's a pretty good argument.
Mr. Larson, do you have something to say?
Yeah, I would just like to make one point on the commercial versus ag. You know, at some point you have to decide, do we want to be welcoming to the solar industry, or do we not want to be welcome to the solar industry? And if you want to be welcoming to the solar industry, the last thing you want to do is put hurdles that cost time and money. And if they have to go through a rezoning process and they're saying, you know, we'll have to get it rezoned, is that a certainty? Well, no, not really. That's up to the planning commission and the county commission. That's one more reason for them to look somewhere else. So unless there's really a demonstrable reason to make it commercial, I would say leave it as ag so that you don't have to add that rezoning step.
I think Sherry had the strongest argument in favor of leaving it agricultural. Would there be a way of identifying it as a particular type of ag zoning?
Right now, we don't have any sub-zones in ag, it's just ag,
Okay.
which you know, once it's built, everybody's gonna know it's there.
Right, I like your point, though, that it's, we could be stepping into a minefield by changing the zoning.
So far, discussion has led us to one main definition, and that anything over 50 kilowatts is in an ag zone.
Yes.
Everybody's pretty comfortable with that.
And only in an ag zone.
Correct. Anything over 50. That would be the only place where there's a CUP for solar energy facility
Right.
over 50. And facility includes essentially anything with solar.
And I would think the operators would prefer that as well.
I think though, going back to the commercial zone, I think we should let over 50 in commercial zones as well. Again, seeing like a factory putting in something that's gonna be like a megawatt or something like that for the direct use that isn't gonna be a large facility or building mounted, that's something that we don't want to exclude in our
So here's where
Operating.
knowledge becomes a problem, and I don't know how much, for example, Wilson Trailer uses on a regular basis.
So-
And
yeah, and
what size of solar array they would need in order to operate their,
So we have to remember, none of this applies within the city limits. So what we're doing today doesn't apply to Walmart and Menards. Okay, but we've got Napa Junction is commercial zoned, and we've got clear out on the east side. So I'm assuming that's the manufacturers mainly out there. And there's a little bit over by Gayville. I'm just looking at the,
Park and some of that.
there you go. So there's very little area that is commercial zone. Really, the only thing per se outside of what normally you think of the city limits, because you kind of consider those manufacturers out there in the city limits, is Napa.
Okay.
And if we make this so that we can adjust it every year or every 2 years, like the gentleman
Always
suggested,
be, always be
It
changed.
should always be
we can,
changed, yes.
we don't really need to worry about that at this point in time, I
Make
don't
it a
think, because
living
there's no
document.
factories gonna be,
Yeah.
building out in the county in the
Yeah.
immediate future, so.
Okay, so right now, we're open to 50 kilowatt CUP in ag and commercial.
Mhm. Oh, yes,
Yep.
we are 3 o'clock. Yeah. Do we feel like we accomplished enough today?
I want to thank Chris
All right.
Barkle for his comments about the moratorium. I mean, a year ago, this was really very much a reality in our world that this was going to happen. And I see all the little details that you guys are talking about today that you don't know what is right and what is wrong and what should be done. I'm not against solar, it's the future, I understand that. But last year, someone could have walked into Gary's office, and I walked in and asked him, and he showed me what the zoning was, and it just, like you said, it talked about utilities, and that's what this solar farm would have fallen under, and there would have been no guidance, no rules, no ordinances of any sort. So as far as, you know, a moratorium, just for a chance for you guys to get your information all in place, I see that as a practical move forward from here. It's not stopping it, it's just giving the county protection against something coming in the meantime. That's all it is. It's not saying you aren't going to allow it. You're going to, you're working on it. And I just appreciate those comments and thank you.
May I ask a
Thank you.
question of the panel, and that is, for those of you who are on the Planning and Zoning Commission, let's say that somebody approaches you with a project, and that project does not violate anything in the zoning ordinance as it currently exists. Are you bound to approve it?
So two things there. Right now, they don't have to come to the planning commission. If they were required to come to the planning commission, we are bound to follow what is in the ordinance, unless the ordinance gives us leeway. There are some areas where the ordinance says we can consider other things, but not in very many places. So we have a list of stuff we have to walk through. And mainly it's to say, do you meet the setbacks, the acreage size, and whatever else is required. But right now, they don't have to come to the planning commission.
So this lady's concern is very legitimate.
Yes.
Yeah, and like I said, I think I'm in favor of putting some type of temporary block in place, and it's mostly so that also, you know, 4 months from now, we don't end up with a project coming in and we make a knee-jerk reaction that ends up doing more damage than good. So we also don't want to eliminate
So
good projects.
temporarily, would these red line items in this ordinance that Gary has put together and we've looked over, is that sufficient as a temporary stoppage or satisfaction to temporarily stop
I
this
think
until
if
we
we
get
did
it
something
rewritten?
temporarily, we'd want to keep it very simple and clear, not do anything too complicated,
Anything over the 50
and maybe
that'd be
keep.
probably the only
That might be the temporary ordinance that we put in, just to eliminate a complete project going in unchecked
Right.
for now.
Yeah, temporary ordinance saying basically like that 50 kilowatt limit, anything above that, and that wouldn't be allowed until we get an ordinance in place. I think that would be prudent to do, and like we mentioned at the planning and zoning meeting, even if you come in for a building permit like now, you don't necessarily have to actually start installing panels tomorrow for that permit to be valid. It can be valid for quite a while. So if you just want to come in and get a permit and basically get grandfathered into the old ordinance, you could walk in tomorrow and do it.
Garrett, building permits are good for 6 months. You have to start construction in 6 months, and you have to finish in 2 years.
So you could
So
start.
those would be the limits.
Yeah.
So you could start 6 months from now and then putting in a fence or anything small and and complete it 2 years from now. In the meantime, maybe a year from now, we come up with an ordinance, but it doesn't apply to you because you got your permit prior to that.
And you started construction.
Yes.
Does someone wanna make a motion that encapsulates what you just said?
I don't think we're,
I guess we
You know,
don't really have
yeah,
any
we-
we
real
don't
power.
actually
We
have
can say that we want to recommend the county
Yeah,
commission
we can
do
only
that,
make
but I guess-
recommendations, but
I
if
thought
the,
I understood that you were saying that, in the interim, before we complete our work and the planning and zoning commission completes its work, that anything over 50 kilowatts will not be allowed. Did I misunderstand?
No,
Yeah.
so that's what we're suggesting, but like as a panel here, we don't really actually have any kind of power. We can
The county
let the
commission
county
has to do
commission
that.
yeah,
talk about it at their next meeting if they want to put it on the agenda and talk about it and consider it, but as a,
So should we make a motion that we put it on their agenda?
it's not.
We can't put it on their agenda. The chair of the commission controls the agenda.
Okay.
Hmm.
I think we.
Ryan?
yes,
Yeah, I said this the other night, you know, I think it's crazy to think that we can get this done in 1 month for something that's gonna affect this county for 25, 30, 35 years. And granted, yes, we can go in and change things, but as soon as we enforce an ordinance or get an ordinance, that first company comes in and uses the rules that we have set up, and we find out after the building, you know, the building department are like, oh crap, you know, we should have had this, and we can't look back and say, you know, I don't wanna be looking back going, golly, we should have taken more time. This is not something that's temporary, this is years, this is our grandkids we're talking about. You know, like Guy said, we hope technology gets improvement for disposal, we hope. We don't know. We've got to do this right, not for ourselves, but for our children and for our grandchildren. And so let's take the time, let's county commission, let's ban any solar farms, 50 kilowatts or more, until we get this good ordinance. We've been sitting here discussing for how long now? What have we gotten done? You know, this is a complicated situation, and I think the reason it's complicated is because we all know this is something that affects Yankton County for a long time. And so I think we just need to take the time to make sure that we get this done and get it done right.
I agree. It's something where you want to make a good ordinance. So,
I don't know, so I guess then we're saying that none of the other ordinances that we've all read are any good?
no, we didn't say that. We just said that we've read through a bunch of them. They all have their differences, and we aren't
don't see that
we
many
aren't reinventing the wheel, but we are looking at a lot of different wheels, and we're going to try to look at the best features of all of them, and put together the best wheel for us.
Yeah, we are Yankton County. We are a unique county. How many counties are mostly ag, but you have the lake out there? You know, we can't just adopt Clay County ordinances. We can't just adopt something in Kansas or wherever. We've got to pick and choose and decide what is best for our county and what makes our county special and makes it unique, and making sure we come up with an ordinance that fits our personality, our county. We just can't adopt something from somewhere else and say, oh, that's good.
I'm not saying that we're supposed to do that.
Yankton and Clay is different.
I'm not saying that we're supposed to just pick one of those and choose it and go with it. What I'm saying is we got several ordinances out there, and if we can't pick what we need to do out of those ordinances and come up with some of our own ideas within 30 to 60 days, then I don't think any of us are doing our job.
So, to follow up with the path you would like to go down, instead of adopting essentially a moratorium on anything 50 and over,
No, I didn't say that. I'm not against I'm against a moratorium. I'm not against blocking anything over 50 kilowatts at this point in time.
well, that's essentially a moratorium on anything 50 and over, right?
We're not putting a time frame on it with if we don't
Okay.
do a moratorium, we don't have a time frame that we
Yeah,
gotta
the
sit on
word-
our thumbs with.
Okay, so what I was going to say is, to follow, I think what you would like to get done is to put in the one definition, to adopt that as a temporary, to adopt that it can go in commercial and ag, and then to adopt what Gary has put together already as section 521, which it can't be 521. It has to essentially, if we're going to allow it in commercial, it should be a standalone article. We have a wind article, we have a solar. So you could do that with temporary to say, okay, this is our herding the cats, we've got the electric fence up until we can get the permanent fence up. But to adopt those, I think is very realistic. And that allows people to come in under kind of the vision we have set up without the real rules being set.
Right.
Right, and don't
So-
use the word moratorium.
Well, exactly, and
Yeah, use
that's
some
why
other
this
word.
would not be a moratorium, it would be temporary. The county commission has to act to do it, not the planning commission. So you
have-
could do that.
You could have that hearing in September at planning commission, and then October you'd be ready to.
I don't even think it has to go for planning
No, if we just do the temporary, that's 10-day notice, but.
for the county
Even
commission.
through the regular schedule.
Oh, even through the regular,
Just
but,
making those two changes, you could have done by October meetings, and then it would have the 20 days after that.
but I'd consult with the state's attorney, but I'm pretty sure reading that statute that allows you to do temporary,
Yeah.
it's
I think-
only the county commission 10-day notice.
That's kind of.
And I think that's a wise choice. We should get a
So you
temporary
guys could do that
ordinance
in
in
August,
place.
if
So,
you wanted to.
I think that's a good.
I agree with
course of
that.
action.
Yes.
Yeah, I do too.
So then I think everything, your concerns are met and your concerns are met.
Yeah. So Ryan, are you gonna give us an outline of what our 4 buckets of discussion should look like?
I was gonna say,
oh.
I think we should talk about next meeting, so we
Yes.
can kind of, what are we going to try to tack?
So, so we had, the first item was sort of definitions and categories. We've already outlined quite a bit already on that just by keeping it simple, which I like. I like simple, clean ordinances. We could then go into a little bit more details of that locations and strict restrictions. Like you've pointed out, there is no 1,000-acre parcel in the county anywhere. Anyone coming in doing this would have to buy up a lot of different parcels. There'd be quite a bit of work they'd have to do just because you'd want to have to combine parcels and various things. You have to make sure that you have your setback set right and everything like that. Can you cross a setback or anything? All those things. So I think we might go into that.
So setbacks, acreage
Locations,
sizes.
setbacks,
one-
acreage sizes.
One thing, one of the attachments Gary had sent out was the Lynn County, I think it's Kansas.
Yes.
I would encourage everybody to read theirs, at least go through the headings and the bullet
Yeah.
points on those, because they get into where they only want a certain percentage of farmland, et cetera, and it's just a different look than like Clay County, Cottington County, they don't go into that much detail. So I think maybe that being part of the discussion,
That'd be good, yeah.
on that. It
That's
was-
everyone's homework. Study
Yeah,
that
there
one.
we go, homework. Okay.
So what are the other two buckets of discussion?
So then the next bucket is what kind of infrastructure that we need, what kind of infrastructure requirements we might put
Okay.
onto large installations. Obviously, they're gonna wanna be next to large transmission lines. That's natural. But if they're not, should we require them to have that route set forth in their plan already?
Yeah.
Yes, I think so. And things like that, road access, fire
Maintenance agreement.
maintenance, fire security,
All of that.
all those things. Solar farms are not immune to having fires,
No, they're not.
so we have to think
And
about
some
those
of
emergency
Some
services.
of those
so-
items, I think we could pick out from other ordinances.
Oh, definitely, yes,
They're-
yes.
they're like-
There's a lot of things you can pick out from there, so that's a good. And then the very last one, which I think will be another really difficult topic, which is gonna be the environmental decommissioning concerns.
Yeah, yep.
So we're looking at those 4 things in 4 separate meetings, and then also intermixed in there, we wanna try and get somebody from PUC or the utility companies,
We-
or somebody.
We might be a week ahead already, so hopefully we have a week to spare here
Yeah.
to go.
Well,
over.
and to be honest, the PUC guy person, maybe that's where we want to do the infrastructure and get their thoughts on.
It would be, yeah,
If
and
they
I
would
That
would,
would be, that would be a
Yes.
good topic to have them here for.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay. So infrastructure would be the best meeting to have them come and talk to us on the
it'd be
one-on-one.
really,
possible.
yeah, it gives them a couple of weeks notice at least.
I'll do my best to get someone here, and honestly, I would like it not to be an advocate. I would like it to be for information.
We want this to generate the facts.
Right.
Do we have a final public comment, or are we?
Yeah, I guess we can do a final public comment.
Just one thing in the paper today. There's an August 1st and 2nd, South Dakota State, and those Jackrabbits. I'm a coyote, so that's all right. But, they're gonna talk about climate change in South Dakota. And they're gonna have a 2-day free deal. It's in the paper today. Laura Edwards, who is the head of the whatever in South Dakota, I don't know who she is, but you might want to have a representative there talking from the state side of climate control to help you out with some of the things that you're trying to accomplish.
Is this in Brookings?
Yes, I think it is.
Anyway,
I think I seen something about
It's in
that
the paper
a
today.
while back.
It's gonna be in Okama?
Okay.
Okama. It's
That's
August,
Chamber.
yeah, it's August 1st and 2nd. And it's free. It's a 2-day deal. And, you might get some answers to some people who are gonna support and oppose what you're trying to do. It might be a good idea to get some information from this place to back up what you're gonna conclude, you know?
or not.
Or not, yeah. Just thought it.
Yep.
And I just want to express my appreciation for you guys taking a look at a temporary ordinance. I think it puts the county in a good position. I think it makes a lot of sense, and thanks a lot for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. No further public comment. I welcome a motion to adjourn.
I am at motion to adjourn.
Second, Loest.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.
Have a good day, Lauren.
See you, Lauren.
Good job, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Ryan.
First time being the chair up here, so.
Not bad.
Oh, I should have turned it around. Oh, no, not a problem.
Oh, of course.
Certainly.
Gotcha.
Would love to have you.
Yeah, and there's sometimes where they've done that, but the county commissioners wanted to do it this way.